So I've been asked to talk to you tonight, but I just want to remind you and to ask you to remember that you're in such a privileged place if you're working with young people. That each of us, in our own specific way, has a platform. And so few people have a platform where they can act and interact. So I would say you have a sacred calling, and it's really it's been given to you and given to us as a gift. And so in some ways we want to be really careful as we go along that we don't just treat it as a job, because it's so much more. So that's just a little reminder. And then I want to just start with the words of Mary Oliver, who is a poet, and in her poem, The Summer Day, she just says this: "Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And that, I read that and I just, it pierces me, because it's a very good question. And tonight I want to talk to you. I'm not talking about organizing. I'm not talking about young adults. I'm talking to and with you who are people who are working with young adults. And my aim and my hope is that when we leave here, we're a little more reflecting on the gifts that we have to give and receive as we do our ministry, and that we become more and more generous with those gifts, and more, I want to say more and more mature. So I want to start by telling a couple of stories. And the first story, I can't find it here, so I forget what it was. The first story I want to tell is about a friend of mine who worked very many years at L'Arche with me. She came as a 19-year-old, and she was in school taking a course on working with people with disabilities. And she was quite a big gal, and she came as a placement. And I was invited to work with her just to help her to make it in our community and to help her to get oriented and so on. So I'd sit down with her once a month. And it was so funny, because after about 4 days, she was able to tell us all the things that we were doing wrong, and that we hadn't been doing it according to the book. And she really wanted us to know, because she had kind of an angry sort of and she'd tell us very directly and so on that we were very wrong. So I really loved it, and I loved the challenge of it. I'd sit there and I'd just get punched in the face every few minutes. But she, after 3 or 4 months, she began to settle down, and then we realized she had great gifts, and she was really an organizer, and she was very, very good with the people. So after the first year, she decided to stay, and she didn't finish her course. She said she'd take it online, and she would finish it that way, which she did. And so she stayed a second year, and we made her responsible for one of the homes, and she was excellent. And she stayed a third year. And the third year, one of the people in her house got Alzheimer's disease, and he went down really quickly. And she was so present. And we realized that we couldn't afford to take care of him anymore, because we had to have 2 people in the house for him alone, all 24 hours a day. And we couldn't afford that. So we started to plan to put him in long-term care. She went bananas. I mean, she just said, that's not possible. We can't abandon him. And as it turned out, we were able in the hospital, our local hospital in Richmond Hill, that he could go there. And she was there day and night at his bedside. She was just a marvelous, marvelous assistant. So when she would come and sit down, she would tell me, I'm going to marry. She told me I'm going to marry Sven. And I said, oh, that's funny. I said, I haven't met him. Who is he? And she said, well, I haven't met him yet. But she said, I'm going to marry him. And I said, well, who is he? And she said, well, he's Swedish, And he's tall and blonde, and he sends me roses. I said, that's marvelous. So happy for you. So every time she'd come, I'd say, have you heard from Sven, or have you met him yet, or is he around? And so we had so much fun with this. Anyway, after about several months, Ben arrived from Holland. Ben was tall and blonde. And you could just see that her eyes were just like, whoa! So again, over the year and the next year and so on, she and Ben began to go together, and it was so terrible, but anyway, they were great. And they finally married. And they wanted children so badly, and nothing was happening, and then finally she got pregnant, and it was wonderful. And they had moved out of the community, and we encourage people to do that when they get married, just to get the foundation of their lives together. So, but they went to the doctor when she was pregnant, and she had already lost several babies. And the doctor called her the day after she had been there and said, you have to come today. She said, I realized the doctor said that there's something wrong. So she went back, and they said that the baby would not live for more than 15 minutes after it would be born. And so they started this process, and the baby, of course, they wanted them to have an abortion. And very, very strongly, this young couple, first baby, don't do this. 80% of the marriages break up when this happens. Don't do it. And so on. And Lori just stood her ground. She said, I'm not afraid. And she said, I'm not afraid to have a handicapped child, and I'm not afraid to be there. And so she said, don't talk to me. And finally the doctor kept encouraging. She said, I think you should find us another doctor, because we need a doctor who will support us. The doctor said, I will find you another doctor. He said, I'm probably the most specialized in this particular area, so I will be there at the birth if you wish. But I will get you another doctor because I think you're wrong. And these two young people in their early 20s just said they would go ahead with it. So the process went on, and we had the couples in our community were meeting with this couple and saying, just if you want to talk, or how can we support you, and so on. We would get together, and that was helpful for them, I think. But I just remember one night I said to Lori in this group, there were about 8 of us, and I said, oh, Lori, I said, I just feel for you so much with this burden. She just looked at me. And again, Lori, she said, if you can't rejoice with us that we're going to have a baby and new life, she said, you should get out of this group. And she said, this is a child that is coming into the world, and we love this child, and we want you to rejoice as long as the child lives. And when the child dies, we'll grieve. So they went on, and they had this baby who came beautiful, Lucas, beautiful son. He was born, his brain was outside of his head, at the back of his neck, in a little sack. And he wasn't able to eat or drink. And so the doctor said he will not live very long, so they put a cot in the room for Ben. And the doctor came in that night, the one who had told them not to have the baby. And he said to Ben, he said, I know these cases. He said, your son is not going to live very long, but he said, the best thing you can do is skin on skin. So he said, just put the baby on your chest, wrap a blanket, and have a sleep with your baby. So the baby lived all night, lived all the next day, lived all the next day. No eating, no drinking, nothing. Couldn't swallow, couldn't eat or drink. And after 4 days, they said, you're gonna have to, we need the room, you gotta move, you have to go home. So the doctor got a doctor. They lived in just near Guelph, and they got a doctor who gave them all his telephone numbers and everything. He said, call me day or night, I'll come. And couples in the community went to their home and set up a home nursery because they had nothing in the home. And then they took the baby home. And the baby lived for 17 days without food or water. And then he died. And we had the funeral. I want to tell that, and I shouldn't take all the time because I got other things I need to say, but I wanted to tell it because it's such a powerful story of the energy and the force that was inside that woman, Lori, who had the courage in front of these specialist doctors at McMaster University and in front of us, all her friends, to stand in who she was as the mother of a child who is precious, who is coming into the world. And her love for that child was absolutely inspirational. And it has rested with me and remained with me. I would never have thought when I met her as a 19-year-old that she had the power that was inside of her to be that kind of a loving, mature, insightful woman. One story. Second story. John Vanier, as you know, is a prominent Canadian. And when he was 13 years old, he went to his mother. It was during the Second World War. And he said, I want to join the British Navy. His mother was very cautious. Madame Vanier, I don't know if you probably didn't, but she was really wonderful, cautious. And of course, she went up in smoke when he said he was going to England, because it was during the Second World War and the Atlantic was full of ships and they were bombing each other. And so Germany had ships and England had ships and so on, and all the bombs were flying. And so she said, you're not going to England, period. That's the end of it. So he said, well, I really want to go. And she said, well, you're not going. And he said, well, but that's what I really want to do. I really feel I want to do that. And she got exasperated with him, so she said, go see your father. So his father was the Governor General of Canada, Governor General Vanier, and I think the mother got to the father first, because when John went and said to his father, I'd like to have a visit with you, his father said, make an appointment. So he said, I went to my father's office and I sat across from him at the desk. And my father said, so what is it, son? And he said, I told him. And he said, we didn't argue, but for 10 minutes, he said, I don't want you to go, you're too young, and I don't want you crossing the Atlantic, and it's too dangerous. And I kept saying, but I really want to go. And I feel this is the most thing I want to do. So back and forth. And he said, finally, my father sat back in his chair. He looked at me very caringly, and he said, if this is what you really feel you want to do, I trust you. Go. So John crossed the Atlantic and joined the Navy. But he said that was life-altering for him, that experience from his father. And I wanted to say that because I'm trying to get the forces and the energies of love that are planted in each one of us to be like fathers and to be like mothers. That each one of us has the same potential to care and to love beyond seeing. Lori didn't know what was going to happen. In fact, she spoke to me a couple of days before the birth, and she was very, very scared. And she said, I don't know if I can cope. But she did. And John's situation was exactly the same, that his father trusted him. And he said, ever since then, whenever I have to make a decision, he said, I can go down into myself, to my deepest self, and I know that I'm trustworthy, and that whatever I decide will come out of my best self. His father gave him that gift. So you and I were made in the image and likeness of God. And the image and likeness of God is very generative. God can't stop creating. You just think of the things, we know, I think it's 1.4% or something of the universe that we live in. That's how much we know. It's like 0.4% of the whole entire universe. And of course we know about the Big Bang, we know about all those things. We know 0.4% of what's existing in our universe and what it all means. And what the things that are the farthest stars, the relationship that they have with us. God is so generative. And you and I are made in the image and likeness of God. So what does it tell us about what has been planted in us since we were born? And what I want to remind you of is that in each of us we have these forces of love that are like parents who are a reflection of God's love. It's not unconditional, but in so many cases it's almost unconditional. We have examples of a mother whose child is under a car and she lifts up the car by herself. She has so much love that she does things that are entirely impossible. And fathers who love their children with so much love that they can trust them and send them out to live and to make mistakes without judging them and without putting them down, but continually affirming them and helping them to have confidence in themselves and in their lives. So I wanted to reflect just for a few minutes on the story that's in the Gospel, because I think you and I, in reflecting on these things, can identify with the characters in the parable of the prodigal son. And my friend Henry Nouwen, who wrote a book entitled The Return of the Prodigal Son, which is very classic and a very, very good book. What Henry does is he gets into the painting and he gets into the characters. And he becomes, first of all, the younger son, and he reflects on his life as the younger son. And then somebody says to him, well, you're not the younger son, you're the older son. So then he gets into the older son, and he reflects on himself as the older son in the parable. And then someone says to him, well, you can be the younger son or the older son, but you're called to become the father. That's who you're called to be. So let's just take a moment. I need my book. Let's just take a moment and put ourselves into the shoes. We know the parable. The young son says to his father, I can't really wait until you die. So could you just give me my inheritance now? And that is a huge insult. I don't think there's anything worse. And the father gives it to him. And he goes and he squanders it. And it says he goes to a far distant country. In other words, he gets far away from home, far away from who he is. And he squanders his wealth. He squanders his gifts. And he's not terribly happy. And then it says he comes to himself. Maybe even not very deeply coming to himself. I think he was hungry. And he was unsafe because he was poor and he was feeding the pigs. So he decides to go home. Not the greatest motivation. But he does turn around and make his way home. What about you and I? I mean, what are we doing with our one wild and precious life? And each of us has to reflect on this and to say, am I squandering my gifts? Am I just going with the flow? Or am I really becoming the woman and the man who has these energies of love? Am I letting those things come and enter into the work that I'm doing? Because the work that I'm doing is not a job. It's something about relationships. It's something about responding to the cry of the young people today. And in our dating, I asked someone, tell me, what is the cry? What do you hear? What's the cry? What are they looking for? And this person said to me, they don't know what they're looking for. And that's about the saddest statement that I could have heard. But I believe that it's quite true. That we live in a world that can distract us until the day we die. You and I never have to be lonely or anything because we can be distracted. We can just get a new app and then we can play that game until, and then when that wears out, there's another one right there. And then there's another one, and then we can look at the TED Talks, and then we can go and watch the news, and then we can watch programs on television, and then we can... So we never... Are we squandering? And it's important for you and for me, at my age even. I mean, I don't have as long as you do, but it's important for me. I'm retired, so am I just squandering? And what is my call and what is your call today? To love. And to love with the energies that have been given to me. To love the world. To pray. To be in front of somebody, not just casually, but really. To be planning, not just because of the nice strategies that I can read out of a book, but to plan because I'm trying to respond to the cry. I'm trying to get to the point where somebody is going to go home and say, thank God, that was a changing moment in my life. We have the power. And this young man was squandering it. He did come home. His father welcomed him, but we don't know if he grew up or not. The elder son stayed home, good guy. But he was as angry as hell. He stayed home, he looked after the estate, but he was so judgmental. And he saw his father as a boss. He didn't see his father as a father. He didn't relate to his father as a father. He related to him as a boss. So he didn't ever develop those paternal energies that he had within him to love, to work with the workers, to create a community of people looking after the estate. He's resentful, and resentment is cold anger that just sits in your heart. The poet Rumi says, anger corrodes the vessel that holds it. Anger corrodes the vessel. So if I have anger and resentment in my heart, it corrodes my heart. It takes away all these energies. So this is how this guy lived, and he squandered his wealth as well. So we're reflecting now, what are we doing with our lives? And we have to take a good look at this man, and I don't have a long time to talk about him, but it's something you can go back on, and I really urge you to take a little time to do that. What are you and I doing with our precious lives? And are we accessing energies where the Father gives his Son his inheritance and says, "Go, Son, I trust you, and you may suffer, and you may die, but this is what you want, and I'm going to give it to you because I know that you'll find a way to get it anyway. I know that you're not going to wait. So go with my blessing, even if it's very, very dangerous. I send you. And I will not judge you, and you're always welcome to come home. And when you come home, you won't find that I judge you, but I will welcome you, because this is where you belong. And I want you to grow up and to become a beautiful, paternal individual, someone who uses the gifts that you have to care for others and to make this an estate where people are held in community and where they grow and where they have a happy life and where we prosper together. Not because we're using other people, but because we're together. And for the elder son who won't come into the dinner and who talks about his brother with great judgment, that son of yours, he doesn't say my brother, that son of yours who went off and spent all the money on the women, I'm not going to the table. And the father is saying, son, I've given you everything. The estate is yours. Come to the table. What I want us to be around the table together. I want us to belong to each other in our strengths and in our weaknesses. And I don't judge you. And I don't condemn you because you won't relate to me. I love you. I give you this in a very brief moment on an evening, and I say, don't squander this precious life. And you're in such a privileged position that when you are in your ministry, when you are at work, to try to come as someone who is a lover, someone who is going to be welcoming people who are different from you and who have different motivations and who don't think the way you do. But can they be welcome? I was talking to somebody else, and when I said that question, what's the cry? That person said, people want to know they're okay even when they're vulnerable, even when they haven't got their lives all together. So I'll offer this story to you. I recommend the book, Return of the Prodigal Son by Henry Nouwen. It's a really good story. It helps you to get in and to identify and to see yourself as the different characters and to decide what you will do with your life. And I'll end with one more story, because it was one that touched my life personally very deeply. And it's wonderful because it came not from a fellow worker, but it came from a person with a disability. And I didn't expect that they would help me. I thought I was going to help them. But the thing about ministry is it's mutual. And the greatest lessons that I've learned from people with disabilities. So I was responsible for this house at daybreak. There were 26 of us living in the house. It was chaos. So there were 12 people with disabilities, and the rest of us were working on our farm, or we were working in the home. And we had a farm, so this one man who had a disability worked on the farm, and he came to the supper table every night without taking a shower, so he'd come right from the barn to the dinner table. And it wasn't so pleasant to sit beside him. So I tried to work with him. I tried to say, Paul, it'd be so good if you could take your shower before you come to the table, because the cows don't smell so good at the table. And he said, I don't like to take my shower. And he said, I just like to get undressed and dressed once a day. So he said, I take my shower at night. So anyway, this day I was really harried, and I got the meal for 26 people, and I was really hot and bothered and everything. But I made a really nice meal. I was trying to do it lovingly and so on, and I sat down, and Paul sat beside me. And so I couldn't hold on. So I said, Paul, I just can't understand why you don't take your shower. He said, well, I told you. He said, I'm not taking my shower because I don't like to. And I said, I know, but look, we're all at the table. And I said, it's so gross. And I said, why would you not? And he said, well, I told you. So anyway, my voice got louder, and then his voice got louder. And pretty soon we just had a huge argument, and everybody else was silent. So we were just fighting it out, and I was yelling, and he was yelling, and I was red in the face, and furious, and so was he. Finally, he just got up. He slammed his chair into the table, left the dining room, slammed the door. So we're all sitting at the table, and there's dead silence. And I'm like a steam engine with fire coming out of my brain because I was so angry. So we kind of got things going. I said to, Mary, what did you do today at work? And tried to get things going. And so we got going again, but I was steaming. And then we had all the dishes to do, so we did the dishes, and I was just dying to get out of there. So when I finished the dishes, I came out in the hall, and Frank was waiting for me, Down syndrome man. And he said, Sue. I said, Frank, what is it? So I followed him, and he walked down the hall, opened the door to his room, and ushered me in and said, please sit down. Sat down on his bed, and so he stood over me, and he's looking down at me, and I thought, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything. So anyway, quiet for a minute, and then Frank says, I see you're having a little trouble with Paul. Felt like saying, you're pretty observant. So I said, that's right, Frank. And I said, I'm really sorry. And I said, that was terrible. And I said, I really apologize. And I promise that tonight I'll go and find Paul. And I said, Paul and I are friends. And so we'll make this up and it's going to be fine. So I really don't want you to worry about it. And I said, please, I'm terribly sorry. And I thought, okay, no, I've done my part enough. So he's standing over me, and there's silence. I thought, I'm not saying anything. And I was just as mad as could be. So Frank is standing there. He rocks a little bit. And then he says, if you want to help Paul, you have to love him. So I was melting into a puddle on the floor at that point, and then he opened the door, and he said, that's all. And so he ushered me out into the hall, and I staggered to my room. That happened a long time ago, but I've never forgotten it. If you and I want to help the people that we're working with, we have to put our hearts into this. We have to look at them. We have to listen with an ear of the heart. And we have to try to respond with love and with care and not without judgment. Thanks a lot.